Scott County, providing safe, healthy, and livable communities.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the Scott County Board of Commissioners meeting here May 15, 2018. We're going to 11.1, Innovation, Exploring and Adopting New Technologies and Processes with the goal of improving service and reducing the long-term cost of service delivery. That'll turn to Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of quickly, we'll go over how this process works for folks in the audience. That we have the team that's here give us about a 5-minute update on the program and what they're doing, and then the panel asks some questions. The audience gets a chance to ask some questions, and then we'll turn it back to the board for their questions. Scott Delivers is really trying to bring forward some of the outcomes that our programs are delivering in the community, tied back, as you see now, to our program profiles from a priority-based budgeting standpoint, and trying to bring that link of our investments, priorities, and our outcomes together. And this is really meant to be a discussion about that data and where we're headed and where they'd like to be a year from now as well. And so with that, we'll do some introductions and then turn it over to Heidi and her team. So Leslie Vermillion, the Deputy County Administrator.
I'm Lori Hussey, Employee Relations Director. Lisa Koner, Scott County Public Affairs.
Brad Davis, Planning Manager.
Susie Meisel, Housing Social Services Manager at the CAP Agency.
Mike Wilcox, Medical Director for Scott County.
Ashley Storm, Lead Jail Nurse.
Terry Raditz, Mental Health Center.
Erin Ulrich, one of the Adult Mental Health Case Managers.
Heidi Kastema, Coordinator for the Reentry Program. And then we also have a few team members in the audience that I'll have them introduce themselves, since we have a larger team and can put everyone at the table.
Carrie Lorenzo, Community Corrections.
Lisa Burkhartz, Mayor, Child Support.
Doug Schnurr, Jail Administrator. And Tim Cleveland, Community Corrections Director.
Well, thank you for having us. So today we're going to just fill you in a little bit where we're at with reentry. So we officially kicked off the program last May, so we've been up and running for about a year. The concept behind it is to help inmates and offenders in custody get services and resources in place before they're released. Our hope with that is that if we can get them housing, mental health services, that they'll have a less likelihood of returning to custody or reoffending. So that's the main goal behind it. So some of the services that we promote to offer people help with is mental health is a big piece, and that's the primary population we're trying to target. We will work with other people that have barriers for housing, health insurance, or other things like that, but mental health is the primary population. So with mental health, we're looking at getting people on medications, getting diagnostic assessments completed on them in order to possibly set them up with adult mental health case management for after they're released to help coordinate some of their mental health needs. With housing, we do have CAP on our team, and they can assist with doing coordinated entry reassessment assessments for housing needs. Unfortunately, we don't have shelter options within Scott County, but we do provide information to them on other options and trying to get them set up out of county if that's a possibility. We have employment on our team, and so with that, we refer people to the Workforce Center. The employment staff on our team will work with them one-on-one to do resume building, interview skills, refer them to some of the job fairs and things that are going on the Workforce Center. Health insurance, so a lot of people either lack that, or when they come into custody, they lose their health insurance. So a big piece is getting people set up on that so they can get to their medical appointments, mental health care, get treatment covered for if they're in need for that. So that's a big component. We also assist with SNAP and general assistance. So a lot of people have the barrier of just financial needs. So we'll work with them to get those applications completed. So when they get out of custody, they can get their food support, or if they qualify for cash benefits, to kind of help them get things in place while they're looking for employment. We'll also work with basic needs. So the CAP agency at times can help provide people with, if it's winter clothing, appropriate clothing for when they get out, because at times when you come into custody, you don't have the correct clothing for when you're released. So we've referred people up there. They'll help people with a food bag at times, and other basic needs. We also have chemical health services that we provide. So I'd be helping people get a chemical health assessment completed. so we can get them to treatment. A lot of times, if possible, we'll try to get them right from custody to treatment so there's not that gap in services. So we'll work closely with them for that. We have child support on our team. So sometimes people are cycling in because of child support issues. So we'll work with them if there's paperwork they need to fill out for that, or just getting in contact with their worker to find out what they need to do to get in compliance. We'll also work with them for other things with like Social Security disability, getting that stopped or started depending on their custody status. If there's transportation needs we can help with, or other services. So the eligibility for it that we determine is you need to be a Scott County resident. We want to work with the people in our county here. We typically prefer if you have a mental health need, but like I mentioned before, if you don't, but you still need health insurance, a chemical health assessment, we'll still work with you if you don't have that need. It is a voluntary program, so you have to be, the offender has to be willing to participate. Most people, when they're seeking services, are open to the screening and getting help. And then the other piece is they can't have outstanding warrants in other counties. That makes it very challenging to set people up with services if they're just going to be transferred around to other facilities. So as you can see, we do have a big collaboration within departments. So I'm the coordinator. I work through the Community Corrections Department. We have 2 mental health case managers, adult mental health case managers on our team. We have Terry from the Mental Health Center, who's kind of the rep for that. She assists with getting diagnostics completed if we need that, medication referrals and other things like that. Chemical health, so we'll coordinate with them to get the chemical health assessments completed. We have child support on the team. We have CAP, so they can help with housing and the basic needs. Jail medical staff, so they'll help a lot with letting us know how they've been while they're in custody, what medications they're on, are they going to be released with these, or do we need to work on getting them medications, and just kind of provide us that information. We have financial assistance, so they'll help us with the MNsure applications to get people health insurance, and as well as the food and financial benefits. And then we also have the Workforce Center on board, so they'll work with them out of custody to do the resume building, interview, any job sort of assistance the client would need. So that's really huge, is to have people from all these different departments and bring their expertise and resources and knowledge into what we can help these people with when they're released. So right now we've had 25 eligible referrals since kicking off. We're meeting in a couple weeks to kind of see what we can do to increase that and maybe what we can look at to kind of expand things. But overall, I think we have a really good team and things are going well so far. So we'll open it up to questions.
Okay. Brad, Lisa?
I have a question on page 14. This shows the variety of services that have been provided, and I know a participant can get multiple services provided to them, but I was struck, given the focus of this program is really on mental health, that this chart just shows that 3 participants expressly needed mental health services. So I'm just curious, are people, what was your 25 people? Were they needing mental health assistance, or did it take time to diagnose their mental health needs?
Right, so not all of them either requested or needed the mental health service. So a lot of times how we get referrals is when people are booked into custody, there's a brief mental health jail screen that's done on them, and then that gets sent to the jail nursing staff, and so sometimes they'll flag people that way. Some of the people that are flagged with a mental health need either don't qualify because they're out of county or they have warrants, so that's how we're not getting some of that. And then some don't have a major mental health need where they would need like a diagnostic or an adult case manager assigned to them. So some of it could be less severe where they just need some medication or things like that where it didn't kind of meet that level of need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll piggyback off of that on that same page. Is there a hierarchy of needs that you would go after within this listing that you have, where if you build on these, then you have a better chance for success if you stabilize one thing first before the next?
So I think we just look at it as more holistic approach. If they have mental health and CD or other things, we'll try to target all of them. So we don't necessarily treat one before the other. We try to get services in place for all those needs. Because if you're missing out on something, it could still affect your likelihood for success. So we don't really base it off of priority. It's whatever they have needs for. We're trying to get all those areas addressed.
Okay, thank you.
I have one general question about pages 11, 12, and 13. I am just wondering, are these demographics, or these behavioral demographics, or socioeconomic demographics, are they reflective of the jail population as a whole, or are they unique in some particular way?
I would have to defer that one to Captain Schnur if he knows off the top of his head. I don't know how reflective they are.
In general, it's reasonably close to what the jail has. There's some statistical outliers in there, but for the most part, it's pretty close.
Thank you. And then I was also looking at page 9, wondering, is that a state target, or is that a target that you established?
That
In terms,
one,
yes.
Tim would be
I think
happy to
that is
answer for
actually,
you.
this is a state, I'm sorry. This particular measure is a statewide measure that all of the counties have agreed to. And it's a measure that we use in terms of our probation clients. Some of the clients that seek services that are in jail are on probation, some are not.
Thank you.
Can we go back to page 11? So in the write-up under Why Does It Matter, it talks about identifying these can help you then identify resources and programs that you might need or put into place. What have you discovered so far?
Well,
And I know it's early. But.
Yeah, so we haven't made any discoveries after that. We'll be meeting in a couple weeks and brainstorming ways to expand or services we could include. So we'll hopefully kind of brainstorm that topic in a couple weeks when the team regroups.
Okay.
I have a question on page 15. This shows the number of jail days for each of the participants, I think. Because if I understand it, there was 25 referrals, 16 made it through, and the others did not. But this shows 7. So I'm not sure what the numbers are, because I thought there were 16 people that went through the program
Correct.
instead of the 7.
So the 7 that we had selected were the people that had either multiple needs or a mental health need. So we just focused on those that had more of a higher delivery of service. Some of the referrals got slight service, whereas just helping them out with health insurance or just helping them out with a CD assessment. So these 7 reflected had higher level of needs or multiple needs that we addressed.
Okay. And did this data tell you anything? Could you make any conclusions from looking at this data, and whether jail days is a determinant of anything?
Right, so we're collecting this data in hopes to, when we reevaluate, see how their jail time looks a year, 2 years, or 3 years after, and hoping that those numbers go down. So right now, it's more a starting point for us.
So jail time, explain that. I just want to make sure I understand. This is jail time before they went into the program, or this is after they've been in the program? Because that was one of my questions, was the success of the program, right, and not
Right. So since we're fairly new, this is a year prior to their referral into our program. So this is, we just looked back at when we started working with them, we went a year prior to see what their jail time looked like. So it's just kind of collect a starting point for us.
So the ones you've worked with, have they been released and now successful? What's been your success then in helping from a recidivism rate standpoint for these 25 or 26?
Right. So I looked up, I focused on the 7 that we addressed here. One of them did return back to custody, but everyone else is still out of custody at this point. I've heard from a couple of them that have stayed in contact. A lot have gotten employment. So one guy ended up getting some full-time work. We helped a guy get into treatment, and he's still in treatment, and now he's transitioning to either his own sober housing or some sort of GRH or self-pay housing. we've helped people get in contact with case management. Some people have stayed connected, and unfortunately some have fallen off. So we'll have to kind of look at that data a little more and track these people down the road.
So of these 7, the one that is back incarcerated or was back in, is that the one that had fewer days, more days? Does that tell you anything when you're looking at this?
This client fell on the lower end of the custody time. She did have one of the more, I would say, higher mental health needs, so that could be something that will give us information maybe on that piece and looking at the mental health, where that falls with jail time and coming back, and maybe we need to be figuring out a way to bridge that mental health gap more, if that's kind of what we're seeing.
So 1 in 7, Tim, that would be pretty close to your recidivism rate then, somewhere between 15%, somewhere in there?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and again, the program is so new. I mean, again, what we're going to hope to do with these people who have multiple needs or mental health needs is look at their the number of days they've been in custody the year prior to, and then the year after they're released. So we'll have some data. I think we want to be a little careful about, you know, some of those individuals where we're doing real slight service to make any kind of claims. You know, it would be unrealistic for us to make claims that we, you know, that we made that great of an impact. But with some of these other deeper in, higher need individuals, hopefully we can have an impact on keeping them out of our jail and from keeping them from committing new crimes.
From the housing standpoint, how many of,
I can make, I'm aware of the one client that, I'm again one of the adult mental health case managers that came back in. She's a known client to adult mental health, and what we would consider one of the outliers of a normal client that we're working with. She's somebody with very complex needs within mental health. She's tracking through, you know, the state hospitals and things like that. So this isn't, I mean, we're capturing her here in this data, but this is an outlier of many, many programs within the county and in the state. So, I mean, that's something that we'll be talking about as we look through the data as well. So I just wanted to mention that on that one client.
so you talked about housing. How many of the folks when they're leaving need housing, or there's a lack of housing is one of the things? And I know we've talked about housing in multiple programs over the years with Scott Delivers. So is what you're doing or working on, or how we're looking at that?
So we had 2 out of the 7 here that we worked with that had a housing need. Both of those individuals had a treatment need as well, so we helped address that by getting them into a residential treatment program, and then typically those programs will work with people on transitioning out of that with housing, either sober housing, GRH, or things like that. We have had some other people we've done some coordinated entry assessments on, and they've gotten on the wait list, but unfortunately we don't have any immediate housing options or shelters to place them in. I don't know if Susie wants to talk more on the housing piece, but that is one of the barriers, is for the clients that are asking for housing assistance, just the lack of resources and immediacy that we have to place them.
I would echo that. So with the lack of shelter and housing options in the community, we do a lot of just conversation with the inmates to figure out like what would be the best solution if there's somebody that we can stay with for a little bit. You know, like just try to brainstorm as much as possible what's available in the community for them to reside at for a while.
So if one of these clients does end up reoffending, we hope they don't, but if they do, would they be rendered ineligible to participate in another follow-up reentry program?
No, we would continue to work with them. In fact, the female that came back into custody, I started collaborating again with her mental health case manager to see if we could get her reopened or what steps to take into that. So definitely would not disqualify them, and we'd kind of look at what was missing or what can we do to improve the situation.
Do you have any information on whether or not these individuals had gone through something similar to this in other jurisdictions?
No, that's not something I collected during the screening, but definitely something we could incorporate to see if they've used it in other counties.
What does referral look like? So I'm going to look at you, Ashley, because I'm thinking you might be a source of referral. What might be indicators that someone would be good for this program?
Everyone who comes into custody gets a mental health screening. And if there's positives on there, they're referred to the mental health center, and those people I also send those then to Heidi as well.
Got it. Okay.
So we have a RAP intake sheet that the jail has provided, and so when they're meeting with those clients, it's a sheet that they check off if they need help with financial, if they need help with housing, child support, so kind of the areas we can provide services in. If they check things off on that, then I'll get that intake form, and then I'll meet with them to kind of dive in further on exactly what they need help with in those areas.
So how does this coordinate with the treatment court? Is there some overlap there and some work between those folks and these folks, or is there coordination? Whoever wants to talk to that, just curious, because I mean the big outcome, right, is the mental health and the SAFE, and so I was just curious if there's overlap with that.
So there hasn't been a ton of overlap. I've had a couple reentry referrals for people that are already involved with treatment court, because treatment court has a team approach as well, and we can provide a lot of the same services. We just utilize our treatment court team through that way, so there hasn't been a ton of overlap in that.
I can talk a little bit about the overlap with the mental health center. As Ashley said, every inmate is screened as they come in. If they screen positive, or if the staff at the jail is noticing some possible mental health things, they're referred to the mental health center, and then we do a mental health assessment on all of those folks. If those people are interested in case management and they need a DA, then Ashley lets me know, and we send somebody over to the jail to do that diagnostic assessment. That's kind of the key. As I talked about before, a diagnostic assessment is what you need to open all doors for mental health services, and so that gives a good picture of what they might need. The other services that are going on are we have psychiatry. Our psychiatrist goes over and does medication at the jail, as well as we do coping skills and anger management groups there, so that when you see that there's just 3 people with mental health on this list, there's many, many people getting mental health services at the jail, but some of them aren't interested in follow-up, or they have their follow-up needs met by, they have their prescriptions now and they have follow-up services. So these are ones that are probably interested in case management, just typically what happens there.
I'm actually the doc in the jail here. I'm not a psychiatrist, actually. My certification is family medicine, but I provide a clinic in the jail twice a month, work with Ashley and the group there. If we have folks coming in who have a mental health diagnosis, one of the things we do is obtain, as quickly as we can, records of where they've been treated before, determine what their mental health diagnoses are, find out what medications they're supposed to be taking. And it's quite a lot of work. We have to call pharmacies and various other agencies to make sure we know what the diagnoses are and what the meds are they've been taking. When was the last time they took them? What we find is that folks who have mental health problems, once they're out in the streets, tend not to take their meds. And they begin self-medicating with street drugs and various other things that present problems for them. They end up then back in the criminal venue, and they end up back incarcerated as a result of that. So we're very, very clear that when these folks come in, we would like to know what their diagnoses are and what meds they've been on for their mental health issues and other medical problems. We try to get them back on those meds as soon as we can. And then we go ahead and have our mental health folks come and evaluate them as well. And what we've been finding, I think, is as these folks have spent time with us, they tend to get back on track once you get them back on their meds. The problem is, once you discharge them, you sometimes lose them to follow-up. And that's really the beauty of this program. What we really want to do is find a means to have these folks followed up that are residents of our county. And of course, we have an option available in our county here. We have a free clinic. We have a mobile clinic. And what we're hoping to do through that free clinic venue is if you have folks in the county who have mental health issues, but also other medical problems that need follow-up, that they can come to that clinic initially and get that follow-up, and then we can find a medical home for them. What we've been finding, unfortunately, is we have quite a large number of clients that come into our facility that are not Scott County residents, and they have multiple warrants, and that presents a problem. When you send them out, it's unclear where they go for their follow-up. And I think it really would be good, as we move ahead with a program like this, to know what other counties have something like this, and how we can interact with them to make sure, if they're not from our county, that follow-up is provided for them where they're going to.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So you said it had to be somebody in the county. I don't know, Doug, what percentage of our residents, because what are you, about 120 some a day or something? What percentage aren't county residents? I mean, because we're only capturing 26 out of our total jail population over the course of a year.
Truthfully, I don't have that data available. I have 127 in custody this morning, and I could speculate on that number, but likely I'd be wrong. It is a significant number that come down here, or come to Scott County for a variety of reasons, and then they get themselves jammed up in one way or another and wind up in our facility.
So you might be capturing a high percent then of potential if there are residents, and depending upon that rate, right? And so these are mostly folks that want to have some type of case management leaving is what you're discovering, somebody to help them with that coordination and support.
The mental health center also does all the crisis calls, and sometimes, I was just talking with Doug's staff the other day, sometimes 6 or 7 a day, mental health crisis calls at the jail, and we screen those folks and recommend and get the treatment that they need, particularly medication. But if they're a good referral to the program, we would refer them as well as we do ongoing skills groups, and we make referrals out of those groups because the inmates will bring their concerns for leaving and the barriers that they have in going back into the community, and so that's another good resource in terms of knowing what they're facing, and we can kind of talk with them about the benefit of this program in those groups.
You mentioned in year 1 year you had, I think, 25 referrals, and you're thinking about how you can increase that. Have you got any early thoughts on ways to increase that enrollment? And is the age issue? I notice it's only 18 or older right now that can enter the program. Has there been any discussion of looking at minors?
There hasn't been any discussion of looking at minors. I think we're focusing on keeping an adult population at this time. As far as expansion, some of the ideas we've tried before is I tried going into the jail and speaking in the units, but that tended to open the floodgates more for how can you get me out of jail versus kind of what the program is designed for. Yeah. So, and a lot of that, I got out of county interest and things like that. We've talked about putting flyers in other bins when they come in about the program. We do have it on the tablet, so all inmates can access it through the tablet. So we'll have to find out if we're missing something more with like this mental health screen, and just kind of brainstorm ideas on maybe how we can, whether it's kind of looking at the new intakes that come in and looking who's a resident and kind of targeting that way. So we'll have to kind of collaborate.
I was just going to mention that Heidi sits on is it a Metro-wide reentry group of the counties that have reentry programs, and they meet periodically to discuss strategies and program strengths. So,
has anything in particular surprised you? We all have assumptions going into new programs. Surprised you about what you found with our population or with the challenges of the population?
We're finding an increasingly complex group of clients within our system. They come in with significant chronic illnesses, many of them not well controlled, diabetes, major problem, issues related to coronary artery disease, major problem. Heavy emphasis in anyone with chronic disease with mental health issues as well. And so you add this to the mix of their medical problems, and it presents an interesting opportunity to manage them the time they're with us, and it certainly leads to some issues related to how you follow up on some of these complex problems as you discharge them as well.
And I think one thing that's surprised me and made this more challenging, a lot of the programs in the metro area, they work with clients that are sentenced, and so then they know when that person is exactly getting out. They have a time frame on how they can set up these services and transition this. Our population here tends to be more kind of pretrial status, where they're sitting here till their case is dispositioned. So that has made it challenging to navigate. When can we start setting things up for this client? Sometimes all of a sudden they'll get released after they go to a court date, and then you've lost them. So I think that's been a surprise to me on the lack of sentence clients we've had.
I don't know if it's a surprise, but it certainly was significant when we were studying the jail population and their characteristics for the board work group. The percentage of folks in the jail that have chemical dependency issues is astounding. Very high percentage.
So is there anything that would get someone kicked out of reentry program?
Nope, so we don't have disqualifiers as far as offense, and we don't really have a kick out since it's voluntary. The issue we run into more is the follow through once they're out of custody. So a lot of times you don't know if they're not on their meds, if they went back to using, or what caused them to drop off, but it's more that piece of trying to keep them engaged outside of custody.
In some of the, since you're on the partnership with others who've had it longer, are there success rates with reentry then? Multiple barriers I've heard in chronic, but are there solid success rates out there that people can work through and overcome with the right supports?
So each county, I think, kind of has their own way of how they determine success,
Sure.
and that's been a topic of conversation is how do people track success for their, and it varies on if someone refers someone to a program, that's a success. So I don't know, we have to define what we want to track for that, and I think we're still in the works for that. So I think you could have a wide variety where one county has 80% success and one county might have 20, but it could be very different on what they're tracking as a successful transition or working with our clients. So we'll have to develop what we're going to track and what we're going to use as markers for our success with clients.
What are some thoughts as you've been talking about that you're thinking about for that?
Well, I don't know, Tim, but yeah, I don't think we're, you know, I think a success marker is just looking at, is there a length of difference between when they've returned to custody or how frequent, you know, needs we connect them to. Did people get connected with an adult mental health case manager and work with them? So I think it's looking at like what services and we connected them with, because I think it's hard to track what's successful in that service because it's going to vary for each person.
So going back, I'm sorry, going back to page 9, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. And you answered the question about whether or not that target was a state target or not. I'm just kind of curious about the 3 years. Is there something about that 3-year marker that, you know, if they made it out, they haven't reoffended after 3 years, they've got this much more percentage of being successful in the community, or is that just an arbitrary number, or?
I can respond to that. I think there's been a lot of research across the country that most offenders will recidivate within that first 3 years. And if they can be successful, the chances that they'll recidivate after that go down quite a bit. And then it just gets to be, I mean, I know we could do 1 year, we can do 2 years. 3 years seems to be the standard that's being used. I know, there's been studies where they've done 5 years, but 3 seems to be kind of the key point. If somebody can stabilize and be successful, long term, they're going to have better success.
Thanks.
Staying on this page, just to challenge the group, wouldn't this be one indicator that we would track success of the reentry program, that we would continue to see the percentages go up or at least not go down because of this program? Or is that not a fair connection?
I'll respond to that. You know, this involves hundreds of individuals, and so it wouldn't be realistic to think that this particular program is going to impact that rate that much. So I think we have to look at it independently of that. And again, I think, again, research says the more we can engage a client and have them be involved in taking their medication, being involved in treatment, having stable supports in the community, their success is going to be greater than those individuals who aren't wanting to seek help, continue to abuse their medications, or, as Dr. Wilcox said, abuse other chemicals to, self-medicate their symptoms. They're going to do worse.
One thing I think that's going to be quite important in the future is if these folks do not come back to a clinic for follow-up, you need to go to them where they're at within their communities to really get a grasp on how they are doing with not only the meds they're taking, but their dietary issues. Are they living in a safe place? Do they need housing? The social determinants of health frequently that have gotten them into trouble. I think you need to go visit them where they're at to help them sort through those issues. I think that's critical. And also, as you deal with cultural diversity in our population within our counties, you have to find a way sometimes to go into these culturally diverse communities accepted in order to have appropriate follow-up there as well. And I think in that setting, having community health workers assist you with that kind of work, having our public health people assist us with that kind of work is critical.
So Tim, just looking at the program profile, we've tied it back to your adult probation, and what I hear you saying is that probably is not the right connection. It needs to have its own program sheet, right, with the resources we're putting into it, and then probably some separate measures.
Right, and to be honest, when we first did the priority-based budgeting, when we were looking at those different programs, this particular program wasn't evaluated, so we'll need to do that. So we did just, it falls within this particular unit, but we do need to do our own sheet and have it ranked.
Yeah, so I mean, it really needs to have some resources if we're going to tip it on its side.
Right.
The jail, HHS, community corrections, and looking at where that's coming from then. Judy, you were going to say something with that or thought, or? Okay.
I do have some comments, but I'll let you turn those.
You guys have more here? Brad? Lori?
I guess my only thought, and I'm going to look at you, Heidi, since you're the coordinator, is where do you think we need to go next? I know you said you're going to have your brainstorming meeting, but I'm assuming you have some initial thoughts. Like, what are the next things you think we need to bolster this?
I think a big piece is looking at the referrals and how we can increase those. Because 25 in a year, I think we could do better than that. So I think a way to look at referrals and early intervention, trying to target these people before it's closer to their discharge date, and just looking at what are more resources that we can utilize, and how we can maybe work, together, collaborate better on getting certain services in place quicker or getting assessments done as soon as we can. So some of that stuff maybe.
What do you think your biggest success has been in the last year?
I think just getting this developed and working together and navigating it has been a huge success. I think I didn't come in with, rancher experience, so just being able to kind of get this off the ground and running and get a program going, I think has been a big success. And I think the success that everybody is on board with this and wanting to help these clients is going to push us forward, I think, to brainstorm and find out how we can fine tune this and do an even better job. So I think we have a very passionate team that everybody is wanting to do this and see what we can do. So I think that's great to have that.
What about you, Erin?
Our biggest success?
Yeah.
I'd agree that getting, because I helped from the beginning when this was coming out of the other work group. I sat on that committee and I think it's been about 2 years now, and to see this starting to move and gain momentum and hopefully continue to adapt. And I think fine tuning, we'll fine tune it and just seeing it starting to move.
Oh, well, I would say the partnerships. It's a lot, it's a big collaboration. And as you mentioned, Leslie, that how things intertwine and working together. And as Tim mentioned earlier, some of the other initiatives that are going on regarding this, the Crossover Youth Initiative, when we were in that work group, we studied, we took case examples of our most deep-end recidivism inmates coming back and back, and the one thing that they all had in common was they had early experience in the child protection system, and there were folks that just didn't have a lot of life skills, and so that's why I think having a team this broad that impacts in so many ways is really going to be the answer for it.
Ashley?
I think just the fact that 6 of the 7 haven't come back to jail yet is a huge success. I mean, honestly, it seems like every person comes back. So, to me anyway. That's not true, but it does seem like that. So I think that's a huge success.
Dr. Volk?
I think knowing who the team is and spreading the word within the county for the other programs we have in the county that could be utilized to assist us in handling this area of reentry, I think has been very important. And I see it expanding in the future in a very positive way.
And I would say that the partnerships is also a wonderful aspect, but so many of the people, when they're released, then come to the CAP agency in crisis. So when we get to go to them ahead of time before release and explain what is available in the community for housing and explain those, it seems to be received better, and that there's sort of a plan or something like that, and it, instead of coming to us like, what do I do today? So.
Anything else? Brad? The audience?
Mine is less a question than a comment about, as you move into your second year, what you're measuring and what it's going to tell you. One of the early questions was whether or not there was a hierarchy of needs that you tried to address. And I really think if you look at page 14, you will see that you probably are beginning to address a hierarchy of needs. You've talked about the fact that people have mental health needs, they need to be on their medication. Obviously, one of the important things is to make sure they have some health insurance if they're going to be able to connect in that way. If they are going to need any kind of chemical dependency treatment or mental health treatment, again, they're going to need some health care needs. But a suggestion would be perhaps as you're meeting with people, you're aware of that hierarchy and pointing people toward that as opposed to just what do you think you want or what do you think you need. The other thing, and I'm not an expert in the area, but I do believe that some of the big indicators of reoffenses have to do with people who don't have housing and don't have employment. So again, you really might want to concentrate a little bit more on that, on making sure you're hooking people up with that. If your primary measure is the number of post-bed days after receiving the service, I'm not sure how much that's telling you, as opposed to what you kind of suggestion, which is, do people come back? And if you're not able to do follow-up, and with the size of your program, you may not be able to do a lot of follow-up to track whether or not people actually got hooked up with services and used them. Another thing you might do is when people come back, find out, did they have housing? Did they have employment? Did they maintain mental health care? So that you begin to tell yourselves which areas you need to concentrate in. So I guess I would really emphasize that you try for a little more than just measures that tell you how much you're doing, and look a little bit more at what do the measures tell us in terms of what we need to be doing and where we need to focus.
Others? Pam? Cindy? Mr. Chairman, it's all yours.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Beer has it.
Yeah, I may have missed this, but the timeline, and this is only for people that are across the street, right? Which is it a 1 year and a day or 1 year and minus a day? is that what it is? I forget from the future leaders, I should remember. So that's the longest they can be in across the street.
That's the longest they can be sentenced, Commissioner.
Okay.
They could be there pre-trial for any length of time.
Got it, okay.
But they can only be sentenced to up to a year.
So the timeline starts when? You'd mentioned something with the workforce center, with the resumes, they start out of custody?
So the workforce center stuff starts out of custody. They don't have the ability to come in at this point and
Okay.
start things with them. So the workforce center piece starts after. Things we start in custody are the health insurance, the food support, financial assistance, chemical health assessments, referrals to treatment, and if possible, trying to get the diagnostic and some of the mental health stuff paired up before release.
So what about housing? As I look down at the end of the table, because that's, as was just mentioned, housing, transportation, especially for that population. Besides probably sheer number of units, are there any arbitrary barriers to find housing? And I will also follow that up with, if somebody has a faith-based house, is that something where, whoa, we're out, or is that something that would be open to somebody that if they need a bed and that's available? Are we open to that, or is that a barrier? Because it's not going through an agency necessarily. I just happen to know the place that has 2 open beds, so that's why I'm asking the question.
I think it would depend on the client and if that was something they were open to as a housing option. I don't know if housing refers to any faith-based programming. As far as what we do for housing prior to release is if they qualify for it, the CAP agency will come in and do the coordinated entry assessment to see if they qualify to get on any of the lists. And then because we don't have immediate housing options, they'll kind of do those conversations with them about brainstorming what are other options for you or giving them maybe some ideas. And then I can work with them on, unfortunately, shelter stuff, but that's all out of the county, so.
Just like make one more comment on that particular topic. We had been approached by a faith-based organization, Life Rebuilders, which has a couple of facilities in Dakota County. They have met with us and expressed an interest in finding a site here in Scott County, so that they are in the process of doing that. And the other thing that Pam and Danielle have been working on is, again, trying to find a site to open up an IRTS facility, that intensive residential treatment services facility, that, I mean, wouldn't necessarily fit with this particular reentry program, but there are certainly individuals that get booked in Doug's jail that probably shouldn't be, that have serious mental illness, that could go to a different community-based facility. So,
well, and the question was, obviously, you know, that's, the IRTS is something very different than just needing some shelter. And so I just happen to know, literally one guy lives across the street that works with, I don't even know all the details, but it's semi-faith-based, I'll call it at least, at bare minimum. And another group of people that literally get banded together and bought a house. Crazy. They're willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I get it would be up to the person if that's something that they would want to do, because I'm not saying force that on anybody. But I'm saying if there's an open bed and there's a willing participant, and oh, by the way, it happens to be faith-based and bringing people around this person to help them along, is that a real opportunity or is that a barrier? That's my question.
If it were a faith-based facility, would it be a barrier?
Right.
I would. It would be a guess, but I would say yes.
I don't think it would be necessarily a barrier to just outright say that. I think it would have to be looked at each individual we're working with throughout, I think, across the panel in the different areas that we're coming from. I don't think it's necessarily a barrier, it just is the right client to fit that, you know.
Yep.
It's just looking at who we're working with and who would be better to go there, and that's.
And that makes sense.
Right.
But to have something, you know, to have a bed open
Right.
and available, and oh, by the way, and I didn't mention what faith it was, right? I just said faith-based.
Right.
If that is an arbitrary hurdle or stumbling block, that's a big disappointment.
I think a lot of it too would depend on how is it being funded, like does this person need to come up with the money to get in there? Are there requirements as far as like what offense they're in for, mental health needs, is that housing appropriate for them, are they gonna be a risk to the other people there? So I think there's a lot of components to look at. I don't think it's an automatic no, I just think there's a lot of factors that would play a role in that referral.
Right, and probably the same would be true of if it was through the CAP or Beacon, right? There's a list of, a laundry list and hoops and jump here and, and willing participant being chief among.
Yeah, so as you just pointed out, like a number of the service providers that do housing just broadly in the community are faith-based. Launch Ministry, Beacon, the Salvation Army. So there's a lot of agencies that are faith-based that do that. I think specifically where it would get to be in a barrier in all likelihood is that if there's conditions of that housing, that if religious, I mean, even within the Christian faith, you know, if they don't particularly subscribe to that, whatever the, you know, whether it be Lutheran or Methodist or Muslim or, you know, whatever the case may be, is that if religious differences would result in them losing their housing, that may be a particular issue. The other thing is just generally not necessarily a barrier of getting into housing, but for people to move on successfully afterwards is having a lease, because that's a really big barrier, is having a criminal record in people getting housing. But if another landlord's housed them, they've had a lease, and they've demonstrated that they can comply with that lease, then going forward, it's a lot easier to get them housed. So, you know, anyone who's willing to provide housing to clients and stuff, I'm all for. I think is just the big thing is doing it in a way so that there's a time after that, because people have relationships, they want to live single, you know, whatever the case may be, that there's an option for them to take and go forward after whatever that housing ends. And I'm the housing coordinator for Scott County, so that's why I'm talking on the housing issue.
We're on the same housing committee, right? By 30. So I just bring it up. So if there's good people in the world, like this guy maybe on this commission report is going to share how he goes to the jail once a month for a church service. Awesome. That's awesome. If there's good people that want to do good things and they've got open beds, who do they call? That's the question. Literally, who do they call?
Right.
They can call me.
Or they can certainly contact me as well. I mean, I think what we have seen is there's such an extreme amount of need that we are welcoming any of those conversations, faith-based or not. How do we add to the resources to support housing and homelessness issues in our community? I think Dan's right. The issue is then how do we fund those projects ongoing? And we have some requirements from the Department of Human Services about making sure housing is not contingent in participating in any type of service that's religious-based or treatment-based that would say, if you stop participating, you are, you're no longer going to be able to house here. So, but we can work through those barriers. I think that's, you know, one of the conversations we've been having on a local level and hope to have more of. So if there's people who are interested in that, we would certainly like to talk with them.
Awesome. Thanks.
Commissioner O'Reilly.
I hope you didn't go over this. I understand what you're doing. I just don't understand how you physically do it. Do you when you have people in reentry, do you gather some of you together in one group? Do you have like a team that's discussing the needs of the person and all that? Is it like a team?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll give you a little commercial. I wonder if you should have a FISH representative on your team. In terms of somebody that could quickly access the community resources. We have 600 partners, affiliates that you could post needs. You know, if they were on your team and you could get much more quickly into the network. So I'll just throw that out as a possibility if you want to add.
I think that's a great idea. Very good idea.
Any other questions or comments? Anybody? Okay, thank you very much. Very nice.
Nice job.
Thank you.